Let's get more reaction on this now, and I'm joined by Professor Adriano Nuvunga, who is the director of the Center for Democracy and Human Rights in Mozambique. Professor, thank you so much for the time. Appreciated for joining us here as well on Newsroom. Just your sense of the cooperation and the agreements that have pretty much been put forward here in this bilateral agreement and conversation between Pretoria as well as Maputo.
Thank you very much. I think this is an important meeting that has taken place today. It comes a little bit too late, and also it is not sending the right message, because the message this meeting is sending is that South Africa is worried with the traffic being disrupted at the Lebombo border. But the South Africa should be worried with the 135 people killed here in Mozambique as a result of the police brutality. South Africa should be concerned with the Mozambique's election. I mean, you have an election in October 9. Today is December 18. You have no result. And ultimately, South Africa should be worried with the fact that Mozambique is getting ungovernable. Mozambique is seeing an increased instability resulting of an election that is not reflecting the will of the people. South Africa should be coming with this, and the economic and traffic at the border should be the result, should be the dividend of peace and stability in Mozambique, and not to focus on that, because that is not the problem. That is a manifestation of a problem, and the problem is that Mozambique's election was rigged big time, not credible, and this election, it cannot generate a result that is considered serious. South Africa should be here helping Mozambique to steer a way forward, also inspired with what the South Africans were able to do when the ANC could not reach 50% plus one. They looked for people that they could work with, and then they resulted in the coalition government that is working very well for you South Africans. So we were expecting South Africa to come with that perspective. This one is not in the right focus, and it comes a little bit too late.
What do you say then, Professor, to any detractors who might say, well, Mozambique is also a democratic country which itself is able to host free and fair elections, or is at least meant to, and that the interference by another country would be tantamount to something that is not free and fair and doesn't actually necessarily help? Would that be something that you'd perhaps agree with, or is it just a case really at this time of the cooperation between the two countries should be a lot greater and should be able to offer a little more help in a situation like this?
Of course, you are right. Mozambique is a sovereign state. It's a state that has the right to conduct its domestic issues without foreign interference. No doubt about that. But the current crisis in Mozambique is no longer a domestic crisis. It's a regional crisis on two important dimensions. Number one, SADC has its protocols on governance, good governance and free and fair elections. And Mozambique's elections, it falls short to those standards of the region. Is number one. Number two, the disruption of the borders, the disruption of the ports, the disruption of the airports, the Maputo corridor, the Beira corridor, the Niassa corridor, Nacala corridor. These are not Mozambique's corridors. These are corridors of the region. If Mozambique's election is disrupted,
Professor, I'm not sure if we actually have you there. Unfortunately, it seems like we may have lost your audio. We're going to try and get you back, hopefully, because I think it's a very important conversation, because if it's become this regional conversation as well, and then regional crisis, as the professor then puts it, then questions will certainly be asked of the African Union, whether they should have perhaps joined in as well, whether leaders across SADC should actually be completely involved in this too. And one might ask then, if you have so many people then involved in this, who comes up with the clearest answers? Who comes up with a clearer pathway? I don't know, Professor, if you heard me when I said that, and just what your thoughts are with regards to that, just involving the heads of the African Union, SADC as well as a whole. All of those leaders ultimately would need to be involved as well if it has become this regional crisis.
No, definitely. But as I've said, the primary role should be with SADC. They went to, last month, they went to Harare for the SADC summit. And we have been pushing for all leaders of the region to say we need a strong position on Mozambique's failed governance and fraudulent election. They allowed my president, Nyusi, to go to Harare and say that Mozambique's crisis and elections is a domestic issue. At that summit, SADC should have taken a strong stance to say, though this is a domestic issue, but it's affecting the regional stability and economic activity. Hence, we are coming. SADC is coming. Even if it's coming for a fact-finding mission, but SADC is coming. Because SADC was here to observe the election. SADC issued a report, and that report was clear to say Mozambique has failed short in this SADC's protocol on good governance and elections. So with that, then that would pave a way for an action plan to address the crisis. So SADC has failed. And by failing SADC, you're also failing the African Union, which cannot come because they say for the principle of subsidiarity, it is SADC that has to engage. But unfortunately, SADC is positioning itself as a club of comrades. So you see even the ANC, even the MPLA, SWAPO, the CCM in Tanzania, and the ZANU-PF, these political parties are not looking at themselves as a SADC, which is an entity that it has to address the well-being of the people of the region and also hold the governments accountable in the region for the interest of the stability. But they look at themselves as the club of comrades that have to protect each other. So this is where the biggest problem is, which is enabling Mozambique to really, now we are positioned to deteriorate to
Prof.
a much deeper crisis.
Yeah. Prof, has this then been made? Has this conversation actually been set forward to South African officials, to government officials then in South Africa? Because this dialogue has just happened then today. That should have been made clear. That should have been put forward as well. That should have been put forward, whether it be in the request, I'm not sure whether it be by the Mozambican side, but certainly as well, even if it is by greater SADC as well. And is the situation now beyond repair? Was there still a lot more that can still be done and will just need a lot more cooperation, a lot more conversation between all parties involved?
The biggest issue here is that there is no dialogue at the moment. There is no platform for dialogue. So whoever is willing to come and support Mozambique, there is a need for a willingness for dialogue. That willingness is not there. It's not there because Frelimo says in the past, they have dealt with Lakama who had weapons, and today who is Venasio and his protesters to be taken seriously. They believe that on Monday, they will announce those results that are fraudulent, that go against the will of the people in this country, and they will repress the protesters. They will deal with it as they are saying. So the problem is Maputo as government, as Frelimo, it is closed, it's not open for dialogue.
If it's not open for dialogue, how does somebody else enter at this stage and just, ultimately change things or make things easier, I suppose, then for the country? It's not going to just be a case of more investment financially. It's going to be a case of a lot more conversations and hard man conversations really to be set forward and be put forward here. But how do those happen then when there isn't even an openness to the discussions, to those results being seen? And as you said, yes, even to that fact-finding mission, whether it be by South African officials or otherwise.
No, definitely. There has to be entry points for this. There has to be entry points. And it is in the interest of the Mozambican people, but also of the region, to identify those entry points to steer a path of dialogue. If Mozambique is allowed to enter into that level of violence that is being announced, if the Constitutional Council sticks to those fraudulent results, that will affect the entire region. That will affect the stability and peace in the region. We don't want that. Of course, Maputo is used to repress protesters, is used to go away with some of the most grotesque electoral frauds. But this time, the region has to say, no, enough is enough. And there are avenues that can be used here. The African Union can be mobilized. The United Nations can be mobilized.
Yep.
But we cannot sit as a region.
Sure.
Pretoria cannot sit and watch this derailing into a further chaotic situations, because it will affect South Africa's stability, South Africa's peace as our closest neighbor, our most historic partner in the region.
Professor, robust is the word that comes to mind, and as cliched as it may be, I pray and I hope that the conversations then among leaders, not just between South Africa and Mozambique, but certainly across SADC and perhaps the broader African continent, are indeed robust in trying to find the right solution for Mozambique as well as it goes through what is certainly a trying time. That's Professor Adriano Nuvunga then, who is the director of the Center for Democracy and Human Rights in Mozambique. Thank you so much for your time, sir.